Well, I would have gotten to this review a lot quicker if it wasn't that I had to get it translated because it was in dark speech, and sadly the bard didn't do so well.
I can see what's in your hand. Skullduggery, skullduggery, feeling just the pain. Killer smile, now I understand. Skullduggery, skullduggery, shattered hopes and dreams all fall down. Yeah!
Hey all players, and welcome to this review of the Book of Vile Darkness. Now, barring the fact that this copy, which is an actual copy of the original Book of Vile Darkness, that was written by Orcus, well, part of it was written by Orcus. When I got into tabletop role-playing back in 2006, I remember that, I went to Borders because back in the day we actually had a Borders. It's dead now. And I went to the gaming section because it actually had a really decent gaming section. And there were a lot of different books, and I wanted to buy one for myself, one for my own. And I wanted to look for something that I hadn't seen in college, something that nobody else had in college. And that's where I came across the Book of Vile Darkness, and that was actually the first book I ever bought. That was the first tabletop role-playing game book I ever bought, and it's just been a crazy ride ever since then, because that's where I found out and realized I want to be a game master. I like being a player, I love being a player, but most of all I enjoy being a game master the most because I get to decide what monsters the players fight against. And during my first few campaigns, I used the Book of Vile Darkness so much because of all the things that it has inside, and that's what we're gonna talk about.
While originally listed as a magical item in 2nd edition, then in 3.5 it actually became a minor artifact. The Book of Vile Darkness will usually serve as a reference guide to evil characters and would grant them even a level and different bonuses, while if you were good or neutral, it will either harm you or turn you to evil. Now, released originally in October of 2002, the Book of Vile Darkness was written by Monte Cook and published by Wizards of the Coast. It was the first Dungeons & Dragons book labeled for mature audiences only, with the second actually being the good counterpart, the Book of Exalted Deeds, so go figure.
In a too long didn't watch version, the book basically just gives us a lot of options for evil characters and how to play evil and how to be evil and how to have evil PCs in games and how to have villains and stuff like that. However, it has a little funny part here. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, yeah, in the conclusion of the book. It's been said before, but it bears repeating. This book is not an attempt to glorify evil, but to define it and quantify it, and in so doing open up new opportunities in D&D campaigns of all sorts. You're not condoning evil, that's not it. I believe it says so in the beginning as well. Author's note. I do not condone, endorse, or seek to glorify anything in this book as it might relate to the real world. This is bad stuff and I'm not a bad person. Really. Sure you're not, Monte Cook. Sure you're not. Let's begin with the evil races that are covered in this book. Here's a picture. Seem familiar? Yeah, that's just the halfling and the human of the 3rd edition of D&D's Player's Handbook. Why? Because even though it's called the evil races, this book doesn't actually have any real races. Now, they're just, you could say it's just evil cultures. It's an evil human culture and an evil halfling culture. And even though the halflings, even though I forget what they're called. Let's see. Let's go to these guys quickly. Even though they do, the Bashar is the evil humans, and then you have the Yerren, which are the evil halflings. But even though the evil halflings do have their own racial traits, they're nothing to write home about. And the human, honestly, they don't like their racial traits are this regular human racial traits. So you could, as a game master, you could allow it or not allow it, whatever. Honestly, their descriptions and the fluff behind why they're evil is good. It's interesting. The halflings actually got tired of the orc raids and started raping and pillaging them. So now they're evil, but it's just an evil culture. It's not a real race unto itself. So honestly, the whole stat block issue there, I think it was a waste of ink. The book could have done without it. The descriptions, good, because at the end of the day, as a game master, this book is really good because it gives you a lot of ideas for adventures or for even whole campaigns. But to give, oh, it's an evil race, if you're gonna give me an evil race, give me something like in the Fiendish Codex. It's Fiendish Codex 2 Times of the Nine Hells, which it has the Hellborn. Now that is a race, not evil, not really, because that's the whole point of the Hellborn. You're the misunderstood hero. More on that when I actually get to review the Fiendish Codex. But the Vashan and the Jerren, not really races, just societies. So let's move on to the example villains. And this book actually has a lot of example villains that I have actually used in a lot of games. In fact, I have used one example villain that's here in an anime game, if you can believe that. It's called the Dread Emperor, and it's a guy with golden armor and has like rings all around his armor that's attached to people by chains, and whenever you strike them, they take half of the damage he takes. So it's a really cool encounter, so a really good idea, and I actually used it in anime. Obviously, not with the stats here, because he doesn't have any stats here. It's just a description, which is cool. But what I did was, I just used the idea and implemented it into another game, and that's something you can always do. That's what's so good about owning a lot of different books, because they're not really that tied to the game. I mean, they are, but you can always adapt and change. Now there's two. Sadly, they don't have a picture here. Oh, where are these guys? Sidal and Goldaris. Oh, Galders. I have no idea how to spell that. Sidal and Galdaris. Now, Sidal is a Medusa, and Galdaris is a half-orc. Now, they're in love. And the reason I'm talking about them and not the other example villains is because the other example villains are interesting. There's a dragon that's possessed by a demon, and the demon makes them use drugs. But it was a chromatic dragon anyways, so it was evil anyways. Yeah. And there's the Dread Emperor, who's cool for an encounter, for an idea, for a villain. Really cool. But then you have Sidal and Galdaris, which honestly they're odd. Because Galdaris is madly in love with Sidal. And Sidal likes Galdaris a lot too. They're villains. They get together along, because, there's a saying that goes, evil can love and good can hate. And they're both evil and they love each other. However, Galdaris thinks and believes that to achieve maximum pleasure and maximum ecstasy, he needs to be petrified by Sidal. And that's what Galdaris, even though he's evil, that's one of the things he likes to do the most. Try to get Sidal to petrify him. Now, whether or not he wants to be petrified during the action, I imagine probably so. But it's weird. And yeah, to be honest, the Dread Emperor does have stats. He's CR20 and he's a wizard with full plate. But, his full plate actually has some things. It's an actual, magical item that lets him cast spells in the full plate. Now, this book also has, after the example villains, example of evil locations. And sadly only has two. The Azure Veil, I believe it's called. It gives you nightmares. That's basically what it is. Then you have the Goblin Pits of Iorak.
So in the Goblin Pits of Iorak, goblins spend days bathing in alchemical substances that they spend time in agony, but if they survive, they get out of those waters with increased strength and sometimes even increased sizes. So it's a really cool place to start off your players in a Book of Vile Darkness adventure.
And of course, being a third edition book, it's riddled with a lot of new and different rules. Back in the day, in third edition actually, a lot of the supplements had their own rules, and this one is no exception. It has rules for ritual sacrifices, which can give you XP and gold, not physical one, just imaginary XP and gold to create magic items. It also has rules for possessions. When a demon possesses you, it can bolster your ability scores actually, or it can hinder them. Among other rules, you also have diseases, poisons, and stuff like that. But I want to talk to you about the curses. Because it says here that these list of curses, you can trade them off for a use curse, or a bestow curse, or a greater bestow curse. So I want to give you an example. In the bestow curse list, you can exchange them for the target is rendered sterile. Which honestly, if you're a villain and you cast that on one of the players, that could be really, really funny. Impotent would be, I think, even more so hilarious. Let's see. Each round in combat, there's a 25% chance that the target will attack the nearest creature rather than choosing an opponent normally, which can really hinder you. Let's see. All creatures of a specific kind, such as orcs, owlbears, or black dragons, are permanently invisible to the sight of the victim. Invisibility Purge does not help, but See Invisibility and True Seeing does. The spellcaster chooses the type of creature. That is hilarious. In a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. Because if you want to mess with somebody, turn halflings invisible or something common. Not humans, because that'd be too obvious. But something common but inconspicuous, like halflings or gnomes. Oh, check this one out. At some point within the next week, or whenever it's feasible, thieves are able to steal all monetary wealth the victim has. So it's a curse that you are left without money, within a week. Oh, every time the victim makes a d20 roll, a roll of 20 counts as a 1. So a natural 20 counts as a natural 1. And that was horrible. Now, it has a couple of other things here, but honestly, they're really cool if you're a villain. If you have a villainous NPC with bestow curse, I would totally tell you go for it. You use these curses on your players because they're not going to be expecting them, and they're really interesting curses. You can work around with them a little bit, like for example, the one that's rendered sterile, make them rendered impotent, and like, oh, you're cursed. You don't know what it does. And let's suppose that his character's like kind of pious, and the whole campaign passes on, and in the epilogue he gets married, and that's where you drop the bomb. You're impotent. What? You remember that cursed that you got hit 20 sessions ago? Yeah, that was the cursed. The curse was for you to become impotent. And that's your epilogue. I mean, that's horrible, sure. But, as a player, and if the game master gives you a choice to, use this, it's not that great. There's one to make the person blind and deaf, but that's what the blindness and deafness spell is for. Now, the greater curse. Now, that one's hilarious. A random friend or family member of the target contracts a disease. It doesn't strike you directly, it's just one of your loved ones has a disease. Let's see. Oh, 1d4 plus 1 of the target's loved ones or allies are affected by a curse chosen from the previous table. That's hilarious. Just spreading the love. The target cannot cast spells or spell-like abilities or trigger spell completion items. That one is going to destroy you if you're a spellcaster, obviously. Like, a lot. And of course, this one that says the target's most powerful or cherished item falls apart, becoming useless forever. So these tend to be more usable, more combat ready, but they can honestly break the game. Because if you're a player and using it, you're fighting a guy with a really powerful weapon. And then you use it and you know destroy his weapon, the combat's done. Or if you're fighting a spellcaster, you can't use spells anymore. Then you have the issues of dying curses, which are also explained here. If a powerful spellcaster casts bestow curse, well, as he dies, that's a dying curse. And you don't actually have to cast it. It's just you're that vile and despicable that your final words are actually a curse. And you have family curses and stuff here. Then you go over to diseases, and a lot of the diseases here are really, really funny. Like, there's one called Warp Touch. That's one of the worst effects of rock chaos and dissolution. The malady knows as Warp Touch as a random set of effects that manifest immediately. Once it takes hold, no more saving throws are needed. The malady gets neither better nor worse. A removed disease accomplishes nothing. When a character falls victim to the disease, roll on the table. Then you have a table with a lot of different effects, and they can range from become very thin, 1d6 strength, and constitution drain. Tongue grows very long. Skin withers. Grow horns and gain a gore attack. Petrifying eyes, you gain a gaze attack. Form steaming pustules. Uncontrollable stench in a 5-foot radius centered on the victim. Awesome. Grow working wings. Arm becomes tentacles. Body forms into formless jelly and the character automatically dies. Mouth seals forever. Hair turns a random color. Back curves and you grow a hump. And you grow an extra useless arm. And I love the fact that you grow an arm, but it's useless. So Warp Touch is funny. Now, besides Warp Touch being funny, you have something called Faceless Hate.
Ooh, Faceless Hate. You can totally base a whole campaign just around this disease alone. See, when you die from this disease by constitution or strength, your face disappears and you become intent on killing everybody you know. After you kill everybody you know, you kill everybody else. And the only way to remove it is with a wish or miracle spell. And even if you die, you need a remove disease spells to be cast on the corpse, because a raise dead won't work. Now this is a disease of apocalyptic proportions.
Now you also have some other aspects of evil. For example, Dark Chant and Dark Speech, which Dark Speech is actually the reason the bard is dead. So, what Dark Speech is the original form of evil language and dialect. Abyssal and Infernal came from Dark Speech. So maybe you could say that Dark Speech is actually the evil language in AD&D. So that'd be interesting if it was. Then there are ways to use Dark Speech. Like you can use Dark Speech to hinder people, damage people, control undead actually, get even better along with other evil people. However, you need a feat to be able to utter a couple of words of Dark Speech, because the feat doesn't let you speak Dark Speech freely, because those people that speak Dark Speech freely rue the day, because if you don't have the feat and you speak Dark Speech, you die, which is happened to him. Now the feat lets you do a couple of things with it, like what I already mentioned. One of my favorite rules from this book, which I have used tirelessly in different games, which annoy the living of my players, is Vile Damage. Now, what Vile Damage is damage that cannot be healed unless you use restorative magic in an area of hollow or a sacred place. So in the middle of combat, Vile Damage sucks. And there are a lot of ways to deal vile damage in this book. For example, there's a template called Corrupted Creature who deals half his hit die worth of vile damage in every single attack it does. And that is hilarious, because then you have people like, oh no, it's just 1 or 2 points of damage, but that piles up. And then you're like, oh, you have 40 points of damage, but 20 of that is vile damage. And then the cleric casts heal, and then you only heal 20, because the other 20, you need to go to a consecrated area and then cast a spell there. No break enchantment, no remove curse, no remove disease. It has to be in a sacred area, and it has to be healing magic, or else the vile damage is never going away. Understand that it's damage that never goes away, and it's hilarious. Obviously, if you're a game master, use it sparingly. You have to use it sparingly because you might permanently cripple your party your players, depending on where they are. At the time, as a player, you don't have that many ways of dealing vile damage. There's a couple of feats which are cool, but it only deals 1 point of vile damage, and there are spells, but they're dangerous to use. After that, you just have evil equipment, which gives you torture devices, daggers for ritual sacrifices, a couple of material components which are weird. And I gotta read, not what they do, because it's material components that when you use them, they have an added effect on the spell. However, what they are is the very interesting part. Oh yeah, you also have drugs there, but who cares, and poisons. Now, Chromatic Dragonheart, the spell deals an additional 2d6 points of damage to a good-aligned target. Humanoid Heart, a spell with this component, its effective caster level increases by 2. And obviously the heart has to be intact. Humanoid Child's Eye. Let's say you know the book is evil. The duration of the spell is doubled. And a soul in a larva form. Because souls have larva forms. So, when it gets extracted, it goes to hell and stuff like that. So, yeah, you have the equipment, which it's interesting. Honestly, not so much for players. I'll use it more for villains, to give them a very interesting aspect, because then you have a villain that they stumble upon his laboratory, and then he has small children's eyes and brains of humans and stuff like that. It'll make the players hate your villain, and sometimes that's what you want. After that, you have the feats, which I already said that a couple of them lets you deal vile damage. You have the Dark Speech feat. You have one called Mortal Bane. Mortal Bane is a spell-like ability. Yeah, it's for spell-like abilities. Mortal Bane, what it does is your spell-like ability deals a lot more damage to mortals. I think it's 3d6 more. Which, when you combine it with a couple of things like a Warlock in 3.5, things get broken. But more on Nexia's Fatum some other time. That character was weird and ridiculously powerful. In part thanks to this book. You have Willing Deformities to give your character a little edge, like natural armor, increasing a couple of ability scores, because it's 3rd edition and they did not know what balancing was. Which, kind of cool, kind of awesome, kind of horrible. Depends on how you see it. And then of course you go to one of my favorite chapters, my second favorite chapter, the Prestige classes.